pleasant good evening. Welcome to the APNU-AFC TV live as we continue to bring you the update as we await the report and the meeting of the Ghana Elections Commission, which is to be had tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I'm joined by my colleague, Mr. Sherrod Duncan. Good evening.
Good evening, Chris, members of the public. As Chris said, we're so happy that so many of you can join us this evening, and we are following whatever updates are emanating from GCOM this evening. Not very much, but we are anticipating that final report, which will bring the stage 4 of the national recount to a conclusion tomorrow. I think 1 o'clock, the Chief Elections Officer is set to deliver his report to the Chairperson of the Ghana Elections Commission, Justice Claudette Singh.
Right, exactly. And of course, we just keep reiterating to you that coming out of the meeting yesterday with the Ghana Elections Commission, in which the chairperson and the commissioners deliberated on the report, which was submitted by the CEO, Mr. Keith Lowenfield, last Saturday. And of course, after that meeting, the chairperson, Justice Claudette Singh, requested the CEO to submit his report, which is due tomorrow, 1 p.m., and which the Ghana Elections Commission will meet. Immediately after that, or sometime thereafter, a declaration based on that report is to be made, which will be, as Mr. Duncan mentioned, the fourth and final stage of the national recount and the verification of the votes cast. Earlier this afternoon, co-campaign manager of the APNU-AFC, Mr. Joseph Harmon, addressed the nation or put out a statement. We want to quickly play that statement for you, and then we're going to come back and discuss the pronouncements by Mr. Joseph Harmon, co-campaign manager of the APNU-AFC.
Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, in Guyana and across the diaspora. The press statement today is headed, "The GCOM CEO must declare only valid votes." On Tuesday, the chairperson of the Ghana Elections Commission, Justice retired Claudette Singh, gave her decision on the Chief Elections Officer report concerning the national recount process of ballots that were cast at the March 2nd elections in Guyana. In her two-page decision, the chairman concluded, and I quote, "In light of the foregoing, and in keeping with Order 60 of 2020, and its addendum dated the 29th of May 2020, I hereby request the Chief Elections Officer to prepare and submit to the Commission a report to ascertain the results of the elections under Section 96 of the Representation of the People's Act, Chapter 103. Later in the afternoon, the chairman wrote the CEO in these terms, and I quote, "Pursuant to Article 177(2)(b) of the Constitution and Section 96 of the Representation of the People's Act, Chapter 103, you are hereby requested to prepare and submit your report by 1300 hours on 18th of June 2020, using the results of the recount for consideration by the Commission." During the recount process, it will be recalled that the Partnership for National Unity and the Alliance for Change provided cogent and irrefutable evidence of electoral fraud perpetrated by the People's Progressive Party before and during the 2020 general and regional elections. Let me remind you of some of those issues which cannot and must not be discounted. 1. Counterfoils on ballots carrying the same number. The discovery of wrong lists in ballot boxes for votes cast at different places. Ballots for one region cast in another region. Dead persons voting. Persons who were not present in Guyana on the 2nd of March voting. We provided all this information to GCOM, asking for them to investigate and pronounce on these issues, which were a part of the electoral body's own records. GCOM investigated and were provided with independent proof of our claim by the Commissioner of Police. We have written more than 25 letters to the Elections Commission on these matters. And these matters are confirmed in the Chief Elections Officer report to the Guyana Elections Commission concerning our contention of fraud, which states, among other things, and I quote, "In respect of the allegation of voter impersonation, responses from the Chief Immigration Officer and review of the General Registrar's Office deceased reports confirmed that these were of substance." And this is from the CEO's report. Further, the CEO stated, and I quote, "Finally, the summation of anomalies and instances of voter impersonation identified clearly does not appear to satisfy the criteria of impartiality, fairness, and compliance with provisions of the Constitution and the Representation of the People's Act, Chapter 103. Consequently, on the basis of the votes counted and the information furnished from the recount, it cannot be ascertained that the results in all the districts meet the standard of fair and credible elections." End of quote. This is from the Chief Elections Officer report to the Commission. My fellow Guyanese, Section 96 of the Representation of the People's Act directs that the Chief Elections Officer shall calculate the number of valid votes of electors which have been cast for each list of candidates, and thereupon shall ascertain the results of the elections. We are saying that the Chief Elections Officer, given his own report to the Commission and the subsequent request of the Chairman, must use only the votes that had all supporting statutory documents in the ballot boxes when they were recounted. These, by law, are the only valid votes in a clearly tainted process. Impure and illegal votes cannot be used to arrive at valid votes and a legal result. As I also said on Tuesday night, GCOM has not made a declaration on the outcome of these elections. We now await the report of the Chief Elections Officer to the Commission and remain optimistic for a favorable outcome to this process for the good of all Guyanese. We continue to urge restraint by all Guyanese, be they our supporters or any other party supporters. We ask that you exercise restraint as we await the declaration by the Chairman of the Elections Commission. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, welcome back. That was, of course, the co-campaign manager of the APNU-AFC, Mr. Joseph Harman, putting forward the APNU-AFC perspective in terms of the report, which has to be sent by the CEO, Mr. Keith Lowenfield, tomorrow. Again, making reference to the Section 96 of the Representation of the People Act, and of course, pointing out that all of those anomalies, discrepancies, clear cases of electoral fraud, those boxes without the supporting documentation, so there's no way you could bring credibility or validate those votes having found therein. So putting forward that that statement that essentially the CEO is expected tomorrow to make his submission to the Ghana Elections Commission based on valid votes having been tabulated and counted.
Yep, and you know, Chris, this is what lots of persons in the public have been talking about over the last 24 hours. Exactly what does that section mean, Section 96? And not necessarily speaking directly to that issue, but I picked up a reporting being done by Mr. Maxwell Edwards, who was a former magistrate locally here. And Magistrate Edwards says that the CEO, Mr. Lowenfield, is not pretending to act on no evidence. The evidence is there for all, except those with some politically convenient blinkered vision to see. None of the evidence adduced at the national recount is imagined or hypothetical. They are real, relevant, and admissible by the CEO in the discharge of his constitutional and statutory functions to prepare a report for the advice of GCOM. He goes on to say that the chair has no source of relevant, admissible evidence on which to base her declaration other than the CEO's report. And finally, another part of the letter reads that the one point cannot be stressed enough is that it is not for the chairman, it is for GCOM to determine by reference to valid votes which list has won. That determination is clear, unambiguous. That determination is the clear, unambiguous constitutional responsibility of the and duty of the CEO, squarely.
Exactly. And you know, just early this afternoon, there was a piece emanating from Berbice, New Amsterdam, in which one of the writer was asking the question, if at a polling station that you have a presiding officer, at the close of poll, when a presiding officer is counting or tabulating the votes, and that presiding officer has the authority to set aside spoiled ballots, damaged ballots, and so forth at a polling station. So therefore, the writer was saying that in his analysis, by virtue of a presiding officer having that authority at the polling station, then therefore the Ghana Election Commission as a whole has that authority to set aside either spoiled, damaged, unverified, without documentation, and so forth as well. So hence the clause in the Representation of the People's Act 96, which speaks to, and I quote, the chief election officer shall calculate the total number of valid votes, the total number of valid votes of electors which have been cast for each list of candidates, and thereupon shall ascertain the results of the elections in accordance with Section 97 and 98. And of course, that is the clause in the Representation of the People's Act. And of course, there's the other clause which speaks to how the chairperson of the Ghana Elections Commission, if I can quickly find that piece of the Constitution, I can quote that for you. But essentially, this prescribes exactly the procedure that has to be followed. It states here that the presidential candidate shall be deemed to be elected as president and shall be declared by the chairman of the Elections Commission acting only in accordance with the advice of the chief elections officer after such advice has been tendered to the Elections Commission at a duly summoned meeting. So,
and I had the privilege of being in having been tutored by Professor Duke Pollard, who is a former Justice of the Caribbean Court of Justice. And he would always say to us that the law is about language and logic. And it's not only that the chief elections officer, rather the chairman, must be advised by the chief elections officer. She must act on that advice, which is quite different, because I can receive your advice and choose whether or not I want to accept it.
Right, exactly.
But she must act on that advice as well. The law is very clear.
And especially that's what is stated here in the Constitution. A presidential candidate shall be deemed to be elected as president and shall be so declared by the chairman of the Elections Commission, acting only in accordance with the advice of the chief elections officer after such advice has been tendered to the Elections Commission at a duly summoned meeting.
And it would go also to say that the chairman cannot tell the chief elections officer what advice to furnish her,
That's right.
right? He has to furnish her with advice.
Correct.
And then she must act on that advice. So
Correct.
it's very, very clear.
And even that and all, the Constitution actually prescribe in terms of the type or how the advice is garnered from. And that is taken from the Representation of the People's Act 96. And it states here, the Chief Elections Officer shall calculate the total number of valid votes of electors which have been cast for each list of candidates, and thereupon shall ascertain the results of the elections in accordance with Section 97 and 98. So even the CEO is bound as it relates to the representation of the People's Act.
So then
in
we
terms
know
of
what
where
the
he gets
advice
the
is.
information.
It's advice based on valid votes.
That's correct.
That must be offered,
That's correct.
and then she must act on the advice.
That's
Okay.
correct.
It's very, very
It's
clear.
part of the Constitution. So that is essentially the situation that we have currently. Earlier, we showed you that piece with the co-campaign manager, Mr. Joseph Harmon, as he sought to set the record pollusive as it relates to the APNU-AFC's position. Total valid votes. I mean, you go back to those fraud, clear cases of electoral fraud in which persons who were dead, persons who were outside of the jurisdiction, persons voted on elections day in their name. Clear cases of electoral fraud. And of course, one cannot come to office by virtue of fraud. According to Anil Nandalal, the former Attorney General, fraud is fraud.
Yeah.
And once one incident or one instance of fraud is detected, it nullifies everything.
Yep. And you know, it is really and truly, we should say kudos to our supporters who have remained very calm, very focused. They have held the focus.
Yeah.
You are to be really and truly complimented for the dignified way in which you have conducted yourself thus far. I think that in itself is historic in a historic election. We haven't seen the same on the other side, sadly, and we can harken back to those days just after March 2nd, where we saw the intrusion slash assault on GCOM. We know all of the confusion that took place there with the opposition and their supporters, even members, sadly, of the various missions and observer missions that were on the ground. And then we saw later what transpired at Lusignan, a bad settlement. At Lusignan, there was a man brandishing a gun amid the protests. We saw supporters of the PPP, advancing to the police, menacingly pelting school buses, and a whole manner of things at Cotton Tree, trying to chop a policeman. On the quarantine, there were other incidents of violence. But you know, for the Apnu+Afc supporters, by large, have really and truly conducted themselves well.
Yeah.
And we just recently saw some foolishness with a gentleman, Chris. With guns
Correct.
and so forth.
Yeah, and essentially that is the video that came out last night, and essentially it went viral with that incident, or that youngster who brandishing a whole host of heavy-powered weapons. And of course, he was singing to the APNU jingle.
Mockingly
doing so.
Yeah.
And of course, he ended by saying, they won't come out, they will effing come out tonight. And so forth. So let's quickly
say it
play.
so colorfully, Chris.
Yeah. Viewers' discretion is advised in terms of the language that is going to be heard in this piece.
All of the blow got blow by. Must condemn and want come out. Don't fucking come out now. We gonna have a grand time, all light tonight, all of the blow got blow by. Must condemn and want come out. Don't fucking come out now. We gonna have a grand time, all light tonight, all of the blow got blow by. Must condemn and want come out. Don't fucking come out now. We gonna have a grand time, all light tonight, all of the blow got blow by. Must condemn and want come out. Don't fucking come out now. We gonna have a grand time, all night tonight, all night. All of the blow, blow, blow. Blow, blow, got blow by. Must condom in one come out. Don't fucking come out now. We gonna have a grand time, all night tonight, all night. All of the blow, blow, blow. Blow, blow, got blow by.
All right, welcome back. That was, of course, the video that went viral with the support of the People's Progressive Party Civic brandishing heavy-powered weapons and ammunition. And, of course, you heard him in that piece. The N1 come out, the S will come out tonight, and so
it's
forth.
Unfortunate.
Very unfortunate so, very unfortunate so. And then, of course, the footage that you saw on the right hand of your screen is that of the said individual who this afternoon was arrested by the Criminal Investigation Department and taken down to CID, where charges are going to likely be laid before him. But just quickly, this bit of information from the Guyana Police Force states that following the circulation of the above video on social media today, in which a cache of firearms was on display and also in which threats of violence was made, the Ghana Police Force promptly commenced a thorough investigation. So far, investigators have arrested a 26-year-old male and seized a number of firearms belonging to a private security firm. That private security firm has not been named, but we are also learning some additional information this evening that they, as mentioned here, all of the weapons that were on display there, the Ghana Police Force, acting promptly and swiftly, has made an arrest of a 26-year-old male and seized a number of firearms belonging to a private security firm.
Yes, and maybe they should also revoke the license for those firearms once they ascertain exactly who they belong to, because clearly they're not being used for the intended purpose there. One man having that variety of firearm, I mean, what is he doing?
Correct.
All right, when he's talking about they don't want to come out.
The S will come out tonight.
You know, just to alert people, as Chris has been emphasizing all afternoon, no declaration has been made.
That's right.
So when you say, and who is giving him that kind of information, you see, when leaders have this duty, this responsibility to give accurate information, and you can sometimes see how people can easily be misled, because when you see headlines stating somebody has been elected president with no declaration has been made,
that's right.
One has to wonder, right? One really has to wonder.
And you know, when you see these images of the cache of firearm, heavy power weapons, it is reminiscent of what we recall during those dark days when the People's Progressive Party Civic was in power, of young people or young men being seen brandishing weapons like that. And every day you open the newspapers or you look the next day, somebody dead and so forth. So you're already seeing that sort of emergence again of the PPP that that all of Guyana has come to know. When you speak about the 400 plus youths predominantly of Afro descent who've dead, and images like those are reminiscent of those days.
Because
lots
again,
of Guyanese can relate to.
Because again, look at the pattern, Chris. There are people who are just smelling power. They're just smelling power. They're not clothed in state power. They're just smelling it. And look at the behavior from one edgel right down. So you can understand if one edgel is already threatening public servants and other folks.
And all of that.
Right? Imagine how persons like this young man are going to operate when they are going to feel as though, you know, for some reason, these guys ain't moving. The thing is already done, and so why aren't they moving? No decision has been made.
That's right. That's right. So, of course, we continue to watch and wait as we go into tomorrow. Is another piece?
No, Chris, I only wanted to say, in addition to that, kudos to the Guyana Police Force, because as you have mentioned, in times past, you and I know that those things went on, you know, unresponded to by police. And the swiftness, or it took a very long time to see the police acting so swiftly to apprehend this fellow when no face was shown
That's right.
or anything like that. It
Within
really tells
within 24 hours.
really goes to the intelligence work that the police force are now doing, and kudos to the Guyana Police Force, the Commissioner of Police, and all the other persons who are responsible for bringing this guy before the law so swiftly. We cannot overemphasize that, and that is what we want to continue to see in our nations, that those persons who feel that they are above the law, they are pulled down to the same level with the rest of us.
That's right. That's right.
No one is above the law.
You know, when you read that the cache of arms actually belonging to a private security firm, it takes you back to just before.
Apologies.
Yeah. When you see the large cache of heavy-powered weapon that is in this person's possession, and you're hearing that it belongs to a private security firm, it takes you back just before the national recount exercise was had there at the Artichon Conference Center, in which the opposition objected to the Ghana Police Force providing security service, and they were petitioning to have private security providers to provide security at the Artichon Conference Center. And of course, we witnessed too at the High and Hatfield Street, the GCOM's office there, in which a large body of people armed to the teeth, private security, who actually was part of storming the GCOM office there. So perhaps, who knows, this young man might have been one of the individual who was there on High Street. But again, like you said, kudos to the Ghana Police Force for the swift action. But again, when you see images like those, it is reminiscent of what was obtained during the dark days.
But just let me tell you, Chris, I want to play this little audio for you. We have the video, but sorry we couldn't put it up. That gives you an impression of how people can behave in this manner.
And there will be consequences. If they think that they can rig the elections and have the kind of peace that we have now, they're wrong, very, very wrong. I hope they're not thinking that in their calculation. I'm making it clear about that. And it's not coded language. It means, I said it, the nature of the struggle changes. So you look at how people, when you have a legitimate government, a government that you accept as legal, there are acceptable forms of struggle. You know, you can protest peacefully, you can go to the parliament, you use the rules. But if they don't live by the rules, they come to power without observing the rules, then the other side should not be bound by any rules too, because it's a freedom struggle. It changes.
Yep. Yeah. I'm going to leave that there. Again, now if there are people on let's say our side, Chris, who feels that others may come to power by illegal means, you know, and we just decide that we want to do anything. Imagine the kind of society we will have. But look at the discipline of the Apnu+Afc supporters, and we have been very patient with this process, with all that we know now, with all that we know what has transpired on election day, from going into those ballot boxes and scrutinizing them. If there's anybody who should be angry and upset,
it's the supporters of the AP.
It's the supporters of the Apnu+Afc, because we have seen where hundreds of poll books have gone missing, ballot box without any statutory documentation, where we have confirmed that somebody has voted in the stead of somebody who is deceased. Confirm that with the General Registrar's Office. Confirm with the Ghana Police Force that there were hundreds of people who were overseas and somebody used their ID cards or other means and voted on March 2nd. And we are not driving around with guns promising to kill or to shoot or to maim anybody.
Or persons will have sleepless nights.
Yes. All right? But you can see where they get that kind of energy, negative, dark energy from when their leaders talk about no rules and that kind of stuff. Because if you feel aggrieved, courts don't exist and police force and army don't exist, you just, no rules, we're not going to be bound by rules. We're not going to be bound by rules.
Exactly.
It is quite sad.
Exactly. As we close the program, you know, there's also the saying, being patient and being calm.
Yeah.
Don't take silence for weakness. I'll leave it there. On behalf of my colleague, Mr. Sherrod Duncan, our technical team, my name is Christopher Jones. We look forward to seeing you right back here tomorrow morning, 7:30, as we watch the hours till we get to the 1 p.m. In which the CEO, Mr. Keith Lowenfield, will make his submission to the Ghana Elections Commission, and thereafter we should see the final stage of the national recount and the examination coming to a close. Until tomorrow morning, 7:30, have a pleasant rest of your evening. Goodbye for now.